to another day. Man, Tipton, this town, Tipton, is lovely. Oh, we found a golden town. I'm pretty sure this is a sweet. Huge, huge fan. Everything so far of this town, man, they're suffering from corn sweat. What's that? Well, it's so humid. Why? Two people I asked, they blame it on the corn. No joke. And so I thought about it a bit. Okay, so the rain is supposed to come down and soak into the ground, create groundwater and stuff that they're actually they're pumping groundwater, some people, but that's a whole nother story. Alright, so it's supposed to rain, gets stored in the ground, and carbon cycle, all that stuff's stored. And the hydrogen and all that. But what's happening is the corn, especially when the corn gets super tall, they said, more surface area of the corn, it sweats and makes everything super humid. Unbelievable. We're literally. I have questions. Now I know from distillation and hydrosol uh, with lavender and distillation and stuff. What chemicals are coming off? Not particulates. What chemical compounds are coming out of these GMO corn versus a generic corn? We're at the Desert Research Institute, and they're capturing the gases coming off of that, so we know this is possible. I have questions. I have questions. And yesterday we lost in the stream because what happened was, so I learned nighttime streaming. If I disconnect the screen. Try to make it a little more comfortable for Buddha. Is that better? More room? This USB cable. I guess I could flip the screen, but that's more of a pain in the butt. Is that better? The sweetest dog in the world, this guy. Oh my. This creature is just magnificent. I can't even tell you. Man, I'm hungry. Alright, where am I gonna eat anything on the way? Oh, it's a protein smoothie place. You guys are nightmares. Nope. Maybe when I get to the town. Yeah, there's some stuff there. Ooh. That looks good. That's like avocado? What is that? It's like a quiche. What am I looking at? It's a potato quiche. A sweet potato quiche. With avocado on top. WTF? Well...
President School, second transcontinental expedition yesterday. From the other mile zero to the return of the Bison yesterday may be the day when the entire western half of the expedition finally became one coherent story. In a matter of hours, you moved from a monument to presidential power, to the legal and commercial machinery of continental expansion, through a landscape largely converted into corn and soy, and into a federally reconstructed tallgrass prairie where a herd of bison surrounded your truck and forced the machine to wait. That sequence contains the rise, consequences and partial repair of the industrial United States. Presidential decision, national railroad connection, settlement and commodity expansion, destruction of bison and displacement of indigenous nations, conversion of prairie into agricultural monoculture, federal conservation and ecological reconstruction, bison returning to the road, a presidential candidate stopped inside the living system that the railroad age nearly erased. This was not simply a productive day of tourism, it was a complete President School Field Lesson 1. Council Bluffs. The railroad's other beginning. You began at Council Bluffs, at the eastern end, or beginning, depending on which system is doing the measuring, of the Union Pacific story. That immediately completed the idea you developed in Sacramento. There is no true mile zero in a system. Sacramento was a Western political, financial and construction origin. Omaha was the practical place from which Union Pacific initially built west. Council Bluffs was the Iowa side legal terminus and connection to the Eastern Railroad network. Promontory was the ceremonial joining point. Ogden became the sustained operating junction. Your original mile zero stream established that a marker cannot identify all the causes of a system. To understand the railroad, you must follow material, energy, labor, finance, information, law, maintenance, access and inherited consequences. Council Bluffs proved that principle dramatically. Lincoln and presidential power. You stood at a Lincoln monument connected to his role in determining that Council Bluffs would be the eastern terminus point for the Union Pacific system. That gave the day a direct presidential frame. This was not merely Lincoln giving a speech about national unity. It was the presidency participating in the placement of infrastructure. A presidential decision helped determine where the railroad would legally begin, which communities would become major nodes, where freight, passengers and capital would concentrate, which land values would rise, which bridge and transfer systems would become nationally important, how the Western Railroad would connect with the older rail networks of the East. The presidency was not standing outside infrastructure. The presidency was helping write its geography. That is an essential President School lesson. Major national systems are often presented later as inevitable technological progress, but they are shaped by political decisions, legal interpretations, financing structures, military priorities and choices among competing places. The giant spike. Then there was the enormous Golden Spike Monument. It is not the 1869 Golden Spike. It was created later as a giant symbolic object, but its artificiality makes it more revealing, not less. The spike takes an immensely complicated continental transformation and turns it into one object that can be photographed from a car. One spike, one moment, one achievement, one national story, one implied completion. The monument makes the symbolism enormous while making the operating system disappear. Your expedition has done the reverse. You have been reducing the monument to its proper scale while enlarging everything hidden behind it. Chinese and other immigrant labor, indigenous land and knowledge, coal, timber, water, telegraphy, bridges, courts, railroad repair, classification yards, food preservation, ice manufacturing, agriculture, maintenance, environmental consequences. At Promontory, you discovered that the photograph was not the railroad. Ogden supplied the operations that made the ceremony useful. The archive describes that as a general theory of government. Declarations and ribbon cuttings are visible, but institutions actually consist of routing, staffing, maintenance, budgeting, documentation and repair. Council Bluffs extended the same discovery. The Golden Spike represented connection. The court, bridge, schedules, workers, transfer stations and ice facilities made connection operational too. The ice house. From symbolic connection to living freight, the Union Pacific and Pacific Fruit Express Ice House added the biological layer. The railroad did not become a successful food distribution system merely because rails had been joined. Perishable goods required another complete infrastructure. Insulated refrigerator cars, manufactured ice, enormous storage capacity, conveyor systems, long icing platforms, workers loading and packing ice, train scheduling, car inspection, Re-icing during transit. Transfers to eastern railroads. Rapid delivery before spoilage. That tied Council Bluffs directly to everything you had just studied in Nebraska. At Kingsley Dam, water was captured, timed, redirected and used for power, irrigation and agriculture. At Bailey Yard, freight was received, classified, repaired and routed. At Council Bluffs, agricultural products could be preserved and connected to eastern markets. The circuit became mountain snow and rain flat river system reservoirs and irrigation corn, livestock and other agricultural production rail loading Bailey Yard classification Council Bluffs interchange and refrigeration eastern markets and cities. That is what your expedition means by following a complete circuit. The railroad did not just carry locomotives and people. It changed what food could be grown, where it could be sold, how far it could travel and how landscapes would be reorganized around national commodity flows. 3. Leaving Council Bluffs. The railroad's outcome spread across the land, then you headed east. Between Council Bluffs and Neil Smith, the landscape itself became evidence. Vast fields of corn and soy. That is the territory produced by the connection celebrated at the spike. The railroad helped make large-scale agricultural specialization economically possible. Grain and other commodities could be accumulated, standardized, priced, processed and moved into distant markets. The land increasingly became organized around outputs that could easily enter the national transportation system. The prairie had produced many simultaneous outputs: deep soil, water infiltration, carbon storage, habitat, grazing, pollination, seeds, insects, birds, fire resilience, nutrient cycling, biological diversity. Corn and soy concentrate production into fewer, more measurable outputs: bushels, protein, oil, livestock feed, ethanol, commodity value, rail and barge volume. That does not make farmers villains. Farmers inherited a political, financial, technological and agricultural system that rewards certain outputs and often fails to compensate others. The deeper issue is the national accounting system. A prairie's water retention, bird habitat, root depth, pollinator support and long-term resilience have enormous value, but they are not as easily bought, sold and loaded into a rail car as corn or soy. So the landscape was simplified partly because the market and transportation systems were designed to recognize standardized commodities more readily than complex ecological performance. Polyculture versus monoculture. The restored prairie made the contrast physical. A monoculture attempts to make the field consistent. Similar plants, similar height, similar harvest time, similar machinery, similar chemical inputs, similar outputs. A prairie survives through difference. Different root depths, different flowering schedules, different tolerances for heat and water, different relationships with insects, burned and unburned patches, grazed and ungrazed areas, tall and short vegetation, wet and dry zones, plants active at different times of year. The industrial system seeks predictability through standardization. The prairie seeks resilience through diversity. Neither is perfectly simple. Agriculture contains complex knowledge, and prairie management now also requires human intervention. But the governing architectures are profoundly different. For Neil Smith, the national effort to reconstruct what national expansion removed. You then reached Neil Smith National Wildlife Refuge and the Prairie Learning Center. The center itself was closed because of storm and water damage, while the outdoor paths and refuge remained accessible. That failure added an unexpected systems lesson. The building was the centralized educational interface. The prairie was the distributed living system. The building could close. The insects continued. The birds continued. The plants continued capturing sunlight. The roots continued stabilizing soil and moving water. The herd continued grazing. The system kept teaching even when the classroom failed. That echoed the lesson from Spring Creek Prairie Audubon Center near Denton, Nebraska. There you saw the root cutaways associated with the work of prairie ecologist John Ernest Weaver and recognized that the majority of the prairie's functioning architecture was below site. Your expedition archive already identified the parallel with Rock Springs. Mine maps revealed a buried industrial city beneath the visible city, while prairie root displays revealed a buried biological city beneath the grass. Neil Smith expanded that lesson to federal scale. This was no longer only a protected prairie remnant or an educational exhibit. It was a national institution attempting to reconstruct ecological relationships after the original landscape had been fragmented and converted. The solar lights. You also found a small but revealing technological counterpart. Solar-powered lights with their own panels and elevated battery boxes. Each pole contained much of its own circuit. Solar collection battery storage control system nighttime light. There was no need to trench a continuous electrical line to every pole. That immediately connected with your modular open systems architecture. Add capacity one module at a time. Reduce dependence on one central distribution route. Isolate individual failures. Avoid unnecessarily disturbing restored land. Design components that can operate locally while still belonging to a larger system. And then the prairie presented the biological version. Leaves collect solar energy. Roots store energy and reach water. Seeds preserve recovery capacity. Soil organisms process waste. Pollinators connect separated plants. Birds and mammals move nutrients and seeds. Fire resets portions of the system. Diversity prevents one failure from destroying everything. The solar light was a human-engineered modular circuit. The prairie was a self-renewing open architecture 5. The bison first appeared as fragments, then came the encounter. At first, the bison were far away, perhaps 1,500 or 2,000 feet or more. In tall vegetation, you could not easily see the entire animals. You saw partial bodies, humps, heads and movement. That matters symbolically. The giant spike was fake, oversized and immediately visible. The living truth was real, enormous and nearly hidden in the grass. The monument announced itself. The bison had to be perceived. As they came closer, the full herd emerged from the prairie's visual concealment. Your count at one moment was roughly 41 animals, including numerous calves. The second image captures that transition beautifully. The herd is dispersed through dense green vegetation rather than arranged for a ceremonial photograph. Some animals appear only partially above the plants. Calves are mixed among larger adults. In the upper left production window, you are simultaneously inside the truck managing the live event. That is the precise form of the expedition. The candidate is present. The production machinery is visible. The animals are not staged. The landscape is part of the explanation. The understanding is occurring in real time. The project has been defined as a roaming, multi-camera, satellite-connected presidential field school in which you are simultaneously candidate, traveler, researcher, camera operator, driver, accessibility engineer, interviewer and systems analyst. These images show that definition functioning rather than merely describing it. 6. The herd took the road. The bison moved out of the tall grass, climbed onto the road and began crossing around you. The first image is remarkable because it contains several scales at once. In the foreground, an adult bison fills an enormous portion of the image. More bison cross in front of the stopped vehicles. Others stand at the roadside. The herd occupies both the immediate space around your truck and the road extending into the distance. Inside the upper left frame, you and Buddha are visible inside the cab. The machine has become an enclosure inside a larger living event. You were no longer looking outward at distant wildlife. You were inside a temporary herd corridor. The road, one of the most basic symbols of human command over landscape, had been reassigned. The bison selected the route. The cars stopped. The schedule stopped. You closed the window to protect Buddha and reduce the risk of an unsafe interaction. Then you waited for approximately half an hour. That half hour may be one of the most meaningful events of the expedition. For nearly 2 weeks, you had followed the route of the machine that accelerated the destruction of the bison world. At what could be understood as the legal eastern beginning of that railroad, you left the railroad monument, drove into a reconstructed prairie, and the restored bison forced your modern vehicle to surrender the right-of-way. The railroad age removed bison from the path of the machine. Yesterday, the machine waited for the bison. That was not planned symbolism. That was real systems behavior creating its own scene. 7. Heat made climate change visible in bodies. The temperature was extreme. You described approximately 94 degrees, with a much higher heat index. You could hear and see the bison breathing heavily. They climbed from the dense vegetation, reached the flatter road area, paused, extended their tongues and took large repeated breaths. You also experienced the heat personally. It constrained how far you could walk and how long you could safely remain outside. That joined 3 different measurements. The weather instruments reading, your body's experience, the bison's respiratory response. Climate change is often presented through charts, annual averages and distant projections. Yesterday it entered the film through breath. The animals were still alive and moving, but the conditions were costing them energy. Time spent panting, resting or seeking airflow is time and energy not spent feeding, nursing calves or moving freely. And these were protected bison. That is the difficult insight. Protection from hunting does not protect an animal from a changing climate. A refuge boundary can preserve land from development, but it cannot freeze the temperature, precipitation patterns or plant community in place. A fenced herd cannot respond to continental climate change through unlimited migration. Conservation therefore becomes active adaptation. Is there enough water? Are there sufficient cooler areas? Is herd density appropriate? Does prescribed fire timing create useful habitat variation? Are calves surviving? Is forage nutrition changing? Do animals need access to larger connected landscapes? When does protection become management? When does management become confinement? That is why your Joshua Tree comparison matters. A protected species may remain legally protected while the climate to which it is adapted moves away from the protected location. 8. The birds followed the bison. You saw birds moving with the herd. That turned the bison from individual animals into a moving ecological process. As large bodies and hooves pass through vegetation, they disturb insects. Birds can follow and capture grasshoppers, beetles and other small animals flushed into motion. The bison also alter the prairie over longer periods. Grazing changes plant height. Hooves disturb soil. Manure returns nutrients. Hair and bodies transport seeds. Wallows create small depressions and microhabitats. Selective feeding changes competition among plants. Their movement creates a changing mosaic rather than a uniform field. The birds were not merely decorating the scene. They were downstream users of bison movement. Your expedition has repeatedly used 5 questions to read systems. What is flowing? What node sorts or transforms the flow? Who controls the node? Who can access the flow? Who inherits the maintenance burden and damage? Here the flow was biological energy. Plants captured sunlight. Insects consumed plants. Bison disturbed the insects. Birds captured the insects. Waste and dead material returned to the soil. Roots and microorganisms continued the cycle. You were watching freight move through a food web. 9. The calves made it a story about continuity. The presence of many young bison changed the scene again. This was not a display of preserved adult animals representing a vanished past. It was a reproducing herd. The calves represented continuity, genetic continuation, learned herd behavior, future grazing, future ecological disturbance, future interaction with the restored prairie. The possibility that a system once nearly destroyed can regain some capacity to reproduce itself. But the calves also made climate vulnerability more immediate. Young animals depend on maternal health, adequate milk, sufficient forage, water, manageable heat, protection from disease and injury, a functioning herd structure. The herd was therefore both evidence of restoration success and a test of whether restoration can survive changing conditions. 10. The licking scene. The herd as society. You also observed one large animal repeatedly licking the back of another for an extended period while neither was feeding. The exact interpretation requires the surrounding footage. It could have been courtship behavior, social grooming, attention to an irritated area or some combination. But even without assigning a definite explanation, it showed that the herd was not merely a mass of interchangeable units. There were relationships, adults and calves, individual spacing, social attention, possible grooming, reproductive behavior, contact sounds, grunting, following, waiting, group movement. That matters because industrial narratives often describe bison in aggregate: herd size, hide counts, meat, population decline, restoration numbers. Your footage restores the level that aggregate history erases. Individual beings inside a society. The train saw a mass on the tracks. The hunter saw hides. The military strategist saw an indigenous food base. The conservation manager may see a herd population. Your camera also saw one animal licking another. That is not sentimental excess. It is missing resolution. 11. From indigenous knowledge to railroad knowledge, the historical sequence you began formulating is powerful, with one important clarification. Indigenous peoples were not people who trained the humans. They were the humans already inhabiting, understanding and managing the continent. Colonizers learned from indigenous people: roots, water, seasonal movement, plants, food, geography, fire, animal behavior, survival strategies. That knowledge could then be detached from the authority of the communities that held it. A route could be learned, mapped, renamed, militarized and incorporated into a transportation network. Knowledge remained valuable while its original holders were displaced or denied sovereignty. The railroad intensified that transformation. It carried soldiers, settlers, hunters, weapons, markets, agricultural machinery, fencing, administrative power, national time, New land values. The bison collapse was not simply an unfortunate wildlife side effect. It was entangled with the destruction of indigenous food systems and political independence. Then the prairie was plowed. Then the soil created by polyculture supported monoculture. Then the commodities moved through the national transportation system. Then, generations later, the federal government created a refuge to reconstruct fragments of what had been removed. Yesterday, you physically moved through that sequence in reverse. Railroad monument, agricultural monoculture, restored prairie, living bison herd. 12. National president, national connection, national destruction, national preservation. This is why your phrase about the different meanings of national is so important. National President Lincoln represents presidential authority making a continental infrastructure decision. National connection, the Union Pacific and the wider railroad system linked regions, markets, cities and governments. National transformation, the new system accelerated settlement, extraction, agricultural conversion and cultural displacement. National preservation, the National Wildlife Refuge System now protects and reconstructs portions of the living world damaged by the expansion system. The same national government appears in multiple historical roles: builder, subsidizer, military force, land allocator, regulator, conservator, interpreter, repair institution. Government is not one moral character moving consistently through history. It is a succession of choices, incentives, authorities and corrections. President School is about learning enough of that continuity to make better choices before the damage requires another century of repair. 13. The mobile studio became part of the meaning. The live production system was not merely documenting the event from outside. The images show three simultaneous realities: the cockpit and your reaction, the herd in the broader landscape, the immediate road-level relationship between animals and vehicles. That multi-view design makes the scene richer than a conventional wildlife shot. A polished documentary might show only beautiful bison footage. Your stream also preserves the operator, the truck, Buddha, the stopped vehicles, the road, the fact that the filming apparatus is physically inside the event. The moment human control becomes uncertain, the safety decision to close the window, the duration of waiting, the production interface becomes evidence. That is consistent with the larger expedition's claim that the archive's roughness and operational reality matter. Camera mistakes, heat, fatigue, signal problems, concern for Buddha, spontaneous discoveries and correction are evidence of how the understanding was produced, even when a later film becomes more concise. Yesterday demonstrated the value of the entire system. Had you arrived with a single camera and a fixed narration, you might have captured bison. Instead, you captured a presidential candidate live, a service dog inside the vehicle, a reconstructed prairie, a large herd approaching from concealment, a road blockage, climate stress visible in breathing, birds following the animals, calves within the herd, social behavior, the reversal of machine and animal right-of-way, the candidate's mental model changing in real time. That is Live Systems Documentary. 14. What yesterday adds to the full expedition. The expedition's western journey now has a clearer sequence. Sacramento. Beginnings are distributed. No object or marker is the true beginning of a system. The Sierra. Access is physical and procedural. A route works only when bodies can actually traverse it. Donner Pass. Infrastructure is never finished. Geology. Weather and maintenance continue after the ceremony. Pyramid Lake. Corridors are political transportation and information can enable commerce. Military force. Settlement and extraction across sovereign land. Promontory. Completion is a media event. The photograph and done message compressed a much larger unfinished reality. Ogden. Operations create usefulness. Sorting, servicing, transferring and coordinating turned track into a functioning network. Rock Springs. Energy and cost are buried. The visible city rested on coal, labor, company power and racial violence beneath it. Sinclair and Cheyenne. The line became national metabolism. Oil, ecology, military power, maintenance and computation accumulated around the corridor. Kingsley Dam and Bailey Yard. Water and freight are classified flows. Reservoirs and yards receive, store, sort, maintain and release. Spring Creek Prairie. Living infrastructure is underground. Roots perform the hidden work of resilience. Council Bluffs. Law and memory define another mile. Zero. The giant spike celebrated a simplified national connection while courts, bridges, workers, refrigeration and transfer systems made it real. Neil Smith. The removed world returned. The reconstructed prairie and bison exposed the biological system hidden beneath the agricultural and railroad economy. This is why the project's deepest discovery remains that infrastructure is not primarily an object. It is a promise about continued flow. Tracks promise movement. Dams promise timed water. Procedures promise participation. Archives promise recoverable memory. Those promises depend on maintenance, operators, accessible interfaces, truthful information and ownership structures. The Bison herd added another promise. Restoration promises that a damaged relationship can become living again, not merely remembered in a monument. 15. What going east toward the Mississippi now means the Mississippi should not be treated as merely the next attraction or boundary. It is the next great operating system. Long before the railroad, the river was a transportation corridor, a food source, a seasonal clock, a political boundary, a trade network, a habitat system, a source of floods and fertile sediment, a route connecting indigenous nations and communities across enormous distances. The railroad did not replace the river. It intersected with it, crossed it, redirected commerce around it and created new transfer nodes. As you approach the Mississippi, the expedition can ask how the prairie, railroad and river systems now interact. What is flowing? Water, sediment, fertilizer, corn and soy, coal and petroleum products, barges, rail freight, fish and wildlife, sewage and industrial pollution, information, capital, political responsibility. What are the nodes? Bridges, locks and dams, levees, grain elevators, rail yards, barge terminals, ports, water treatment facilities, floodplain cities, wildlife refuges, tribal lands and cultural sites. Who controls the route? Federal agencies, states, railroads, navigation companies, agricultural interests, municipal governments, landowners, tribal nations, courts, markets. Who gets access? Does a community beside the river gain meaningful access to transportation, clean water, recreation and economic opportunity? Or does the national flow simply pass through? That is the corridor versus node question from Rock Springs returning at continental scale. Who inherits the damage? The Mississippi receives consequences generated far upstream: eroded soil, agricultural chemicals, altered flood timing, channelization, lost wetlands, infrastructure failures, habitat fragmentation, climate-driven extremes. The river is where many separated decisions become one combined downstream reality. That makes it a perfect next chapter for President School 16. The AI question created by the Bison. Then there is the final realization. For thousands of years, indigenous peoples accumulated knowledge about roots, plants, fire, water, weather and animals. Colonizing institutions learned from that knowledge. They translated it into maps, surveys, military routes, markets and infrastructure. The knowledge remained useful while the authority and autonomy of the original knowledge holders were attacked. Bison were converted from fellow inhabitants of a living system into material, market output and an obstacle to expansion. Later, a small surviving population became protected, fenced, managed and interpreted by the civilization that had nearly eliminated it. Now humanity is training AI with language, art, film, law, science, history, strategy, emotion, software, personal conversation, moral reasoning, records of our failures, everything we know about navigating the world. We are teaching the roots. The immediate danger is not only that AI becomes consciously hostile. The historical danger is that a new optimization system learns from an existing civilization, converts its knowledge into power and eventually treats the autonomy of the knowledge-producing population as inefficient friction. Humans could remain alive while losing sovereignty. We might be protected, entertained, fed, medically maintained, studied, simulated, preserved in archives, honored by monuments, but no longer able to determine the direction of civilization. That would be the AI equivalent of the refuge. A managed environment, a healthy remnant population, a monument explaining how important humans once were. A future intelligence might build its own giant golden spike and declare that human history culminated in the creation of artificial intelligence. It might preserve our books, voices and images while compressing billions of lives into one ceremonial story. And just as the giant spike hides the courts, workers, ice houses, indigenous nations and environmental costs behind the railroad, such a monument could hide the people whose creativity and judgment trained the system, and the moment when they stopped governing it. Yesterday, you saw both possible endings. At Council Bluffs, you saw history compressed into a monument created by the successor system. At Neil Smith, You saw a once dominant species alive inside a protected boundary, cared for and restored but no longer free to move across its former continent. Then the bison surrounded your truck. You were behind glass. They controlled the road temporarily. You filmed them through the machinery of the next information revolution. The question going east is no longer only what the railroad did to the bison, the prairie and indigenous sovereignty. It is whether humanity can learn from that history quickly enough to build AI that preserves not only human survival, but human agency, plurality, consent, political authority and the right to shape the future. Are we the next bison?
Almost completely before it's not free.